Hello, I'm Lawrence Cedarstrom, the host of All Around Grant Show. And today we're going to bring you the tractor parade. That's one of the things on the agenda. But before I get into that, let me give you a little background on the tractor parade. And actually what we have to do is give you a little background on Grant. First of all, you have to realize that Grant is a totally rural area. We're one of the only places in the metropolitan area that has 10-acre minimums. And that means the average of any plot has to be 10 acres. So if you have 100 acres, you can have 10 home sites. They just developed the land 160 acres across from Wildwood School. And there's an awful lot of wetland and whatnot in there. But they only get 16 building sites out of 160 acres. Now, some of those may be as small as 5 acres. Some are 7. There's 111. There's 129. Obviously, you can't build on a swamp. There's regulations for that. But so Grant is unique also in that it does not have a downtown commercial area. There are a couple of restaurants in Grant. There's the Gost House. There's Causey's off 36. There are some minor commercial areas along 36 in Lake Elmo Drive, but that is the only area in Grant. You can't buy a gallon of gas or a loaf of bread anywhere in the city of Grant. So it's a very rural area. It's the bedroom community, or in our case, it's bedroom in a barn community. So it's supposedly very horse friendly. But there's always been a lot of problems, especially the last 15, 20 years with politics in Grant. The last mayor, now he's a deputy mayor, was a realtor. And I like to, in my opinion, he's a bottom-feeding realtor that doesn't always tell the truth. But that's beside the point, and he was always picking on horse places, and he said, everybody comes out to Grant because they want to be left alone. Well, that isn't necessarily true. A lot of the people move out to Grant because they want to have an excellent environment for their children. They don't want them hanging around in Maplewood Mall. They'll buy the 10 acres, then they can have horses or bunnies or maybe a dirt bike or a go-kart, and they have enough land to play whatever they want. They used to have a very, very strong 4-H program in Grant, and there was Doggy Bowl and Kitty Bowl, and there was Llama Magic where kids could learn about magics and use that for a 4-H project. So this is kind of a rural area, but
and Mr. Cedarstrom, if I can jump in here, I think that is actually what is at the heart of some of the political struggles in the past 15 years, is this struggle between trying to keep Grant that rural lifestyle versus development. And I think that's the same kind of growing pains that Lake Elmo went through. That was all the big hullabaloo in the newspaper, and it makes great fodder for people to talk about how dysfunctional everything is, when in reality, when you get down to the bottom of the issue, it is a struggle between trying to preserve that rural lifestyle versus development. And that has been going on in the city of Grant. And you've been right at the heart of it.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting because we showed the clips before on this program about the current mayor, Huber, saying, oh, well, if you have somebody in the attic, make sure we can count them for the census because we want to get 5,000 people so we can get the gas tax. You know, because as you may or may not know, you have to have 5,000 people to participate and get funding from the state of Minnesota for roads and whatnot. Usually it's about $250,000. The last year or so, they did delegate extra funds for towns that were under 5,000, but that's only a hit and miss situation. And again, we have some road issues, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, the point was making, I didn't get really politically active until 06, 07. When I had a friend come to me, she's a dentist, and said, Lauren, they talked about you at the city council meeting. I said, what are you talking about? Well, I had a pile of dirt in one of my pastures. There was a very steep cliff, and I didn't want the horses to fall and impale themselves on a fence post, so I had a man come out and dig it back so it was a slow slope rather than a sharp drop-off. And the guy that was there was a house husband, and he ran around Brad, I won't say his last name, and he would go around, he'd even go to garage sales, and if he saw anything that wasn't right, he'd then have the city write it up. And this guy, he only lasted one term, and he got booted out of town, obviously. But he had said, well, yeah, there's this place that has a big pile of manure in his pasture. And that's the first time I went to city council meeting, you know, because I had my head down. I had my horse farm. I cut, rake, and bale over 30 acres of hay. I shoveled a lot of horse manure, as a matter of fact.
And then you realized something was stinky at City Hall.
Yes, it was very stinky. I view myself as an entree manure. But, so I went there and I said, wait a minute. I'm a near organic horse farmer. I have 40 acres, and I have a pile of dirt in the middle of my pasture from cutting back my bank. And if you can't tell the difference between dirt and manure, there's a credibility problem. And that was my first time at public comment speaking. And then things started going from bad to worse. They started, the Mayor Carr wanted to count horses. In other words, we're supposed to have in Grant is much stricter than anywhere else. You have to have 2 acres for every horse, not counting the first acre for your property. Now, every other municipality, Hugo, May Township, etc., 1 acre per horse. So if you have 10 acres, you subtract 1 acre for the house, then you can have 9 horses. And not so in Grant. You have to subtract 1 acre for the house, and then you can have 4.5 horses. But so they made this guise that they were going to change some rules, and they were going to count horses, and then they could start going after people. Well, that's when I got politically involved. I said, wait a minute. Now, I have 43 acres, so I can have 21 horses per their count. But I only had about 16. That's what I have stalls for. But this was a big brouhaha. They kept coming after horse farms. Came after 2, 3 of them. They have a pattern of this. They'll all of a sudden pick out some victim and say, hey, we're going to get you. They basically shut down Victoria Station, which was grandfathered in, has been here since the 60s. And they have 60 acres. But it's just very interesting how this has went. And we wanted to do something after this horse debacle 06, 07, and the problems with his Brad going around causing all kinds of trouble. He cited one guy for not having a grading permit before we passed the ordinance to have a grading permit. So anyway, so what we wanted to do is come with something to bring the community together. So we started Grant Heritage Days. It was actually started out as the Grant Restoration Project, which we wanted to restore some friendliness in Grant.
And if I can just, as an aside here, let our viewers know that the Grant Restoration Project, they had their first exposure to the public and publicity actually on Off the Record News, a program of our Put Your Hands Together Productions, and that is where they got started in promoting their community events. And I think that's where I met you, Mr.
Yes,
Cedarstrom,
yes,
as well, because you were one of the people that came on as the promoters and founders of the Heritage Days, talking about what you were going to do and the first tractor parade and all of that.
Yes, and we decided we wanted something to bring. There's a lot of older people in Grant too. And what we decided to do was start at the Gost House. There's a field across there. We lined all this stuff up. We sent invitations out that you can come. And it's the only time like kids can drive their mini bikes or go-karts on the street. And you'll see when we get to the tractor parade that there's this little girl driving this little electric John Deere behind. She's cuter than heck. She can't be much more than 2.5 or 3. But the kids can actually drive these vehicles on the street. It goes from the Gost House, and it's about, maybe 2 miles down to the old town hall. And there's a circular driveway. I stand in a manure spreader, and I announce it. We have cards so I can try to get it straight, who's driving it, and what kind of vehicle it is. Last 2 years it's been a nightmare because they got the cards all mixed up. But I ad-libbed it, okay? So anyway, so then they go back to the Gasthaus and they put on a picnic. They have hot dogs, potato salad, chips, cookies, and then they gave out trophies that are about so high for oldest tractor, hard luck, and they put a little presentation on, and it's just kind of fun. And we usually get about 600 people. And it's really interesting because of course, there's a lot of the old timers there, and I've heard several of them run into each other. So, oh, I didn't know you were still alive. I thought you had passed on. You know? And so and it's usually the first Saturday after Labor Day, so normally it isn't terribly hot. And then it's a very nice afternoon. Everyone can visit. Also, that spawned, we started doing a spring cleanup with the Grant Restoration Project, where a Saturday in April or May, usually the end of April, people would meet at the town hall, and then they would go out on different roads and pick whatever junk they found out in the streets, and it brought people together, and we served hot dogs. We were really trying to bring the community together. But again, we were fighting the old guard, the bad element, the negative power, so to speak. They wanted nothing to do with it. They fought us tooth and nail. And so that's where the tractor parade came from. And so it's to bring family together. It's fun. We have people from, gee whiz, I saw a 91-year-old lady driving her John Deere riding lawnmower in the parade. And it really gets a lot of people out and around, and it's enjoyed by young people. The kids love to climb on the tractors. We don't allow any animals, of course, because that is too dangerous. And it starts at about noon. The parade itself, they line up at 11, and they're done by 1 o'clock, 1:30, because they're only driving at like 2 or 3 miles an hour. And then they get back and they have lunch. And it's just a very nice day. It's very positive, brings a lot of people together. And they also give out scholarships. They give out $2,000 to $3,000 scholarships, and the unique thing about the $1,000 scholarship is they have to give half of it to charity and half of it goes to their school, but they want people from Grant. So it's really trying to bring civic consciousness to a much higher level. And it's getting more difficult, let's put it that way.
Right. Now, I will say that I have participated in that tractor parade a couple of times. I didn't drive a tractor, but certainly rode on a few hay wagons. And one aspect of the parade that I was, brought back memories of my childhood and going to parades is that we tossed out candy to the people along the route who were watching the parade. It's
mostly down a dirt road, a little bit of asphalt, but the road goes through the middle of a golf course. So it really makes for a nice afternoon. It's very family friendly, which is nice these days because there's a lot of things that aren't family friendly. And like I say, it kind of goes with Grant because people move out there because they don't want the kids hanging around a Maplewood Mall. The other thing is it allows children to experience the cycle of life and give them responsibility. If they have to feed that horse or sheep or llama or dog or whatever it is, they have to learn responsibility and take care of it. And they also, unfortunately, experience when one of these die, it can be very traumatic, but it introduces them more to the real world. And a lot of people, that's what they want to do. They want a wholesome environment. And
well, and I do want to say that I think that there is a little different environment when you're out in the country, in that they start thinking about nature and observing nature more too, and having a different perspective than just, well, what's on my iPhone.
Well, yes, the nature is an important part too. There's plenty of deer. I have sandhill cranes landing. There's eagles. I had, 2 months ago, I had a hawk injure himself on one of the high lines, and I sent it into the Raptor Center. So there's a lot of that natural being close to nature, which is very, very important. And they can see some of that. You know, it isn't like in town, if you see a squirrel, it's a big deal. But out there, to see, you know, like deer wandering, there's wild turkeys, there's just all kinds of animals. So it does give a whole different environmental aspect. And the wide open spaces, I've had people stop out at my house and visit with me and say, geez, it's so quiet out here. Well, you don't have the rumble of cars going by. As a matter of fact, a car goes by, sometimes you hear it and you look because, of course, I'm on kind of a short street, so that don't get a lot of traffic. But that's that. So we're going to now go to the tractor parade.
And this is narrated, correct?
This is narrated. The sound may be a little bit bad, but we go through and explain what it is. There's a lot of things. There's tractors. There's somebody's bringing a bunch of Cub Cadets. They have a collection of 8 or 10 of them, you know, and they all driving those. There's old cars. There's floats. That's the other thing aspect of this parade is we have neighborhood floats, and they compete for trophies. And one neighborhood has won it 2 or 3, about 3 or 4 times out of 10 years. This last September was the 10th parade of Heritage Days parade. So that was interesting. Before I started narrating the parade, I would have tractors, and sometimes I'd have 6 of my tractors in the parade and have different people driving them. And unfortunately, last year I was narrating, and someone during the middle of the night thought it would be cute to take 2 of the 3 of the lug nuts off the front of my narrow front tractor. And fortunately, I discovered it before I got into road gear, swapped out tractors. So there's an undercurrent that in Grant that can be pretty dangerous if you're politically involved like I was.
Yes.
You know, they do what they can to get me, so that's the way that is. But
Now,
okay, well,
and I do want to mention to our viewers is that the tractor parade footage, I believe, is what, about 20 minutes long?
Yep.
And so you'll really enjoy the film footage of the tractor parade, but then stay tuned because then we're going to talk about the recent Grant Council meeting of October 1st, where they were discussing at a public hearing, the road policy and the improvements that they're looking to make to a number of roads, and the residents who got up and spoke not in favor of having a $15,000 assessment for street improvements. So you'll want to stay tuned for that as well. So let's turn to the film footage.
Here we have the Stillwater Fire Department. Thanks, boys, for showing up. Hey, guys. I'll pull out the road there. Here we go. That's how it goes. That's going to be there when we down there and support them. Wonderful group. Okay. Now we come. We have the Dr. Star Club. Beautiful. It looks like about a 1949 or 54. Converted into a bus. Beautiful.
Good to see you. Good. Thank you. Glad to see you.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Okay, hi. There we go. Another Gostown float. To the float. Okay. Here we go. There's 50,000 driving that big boat. Hey, it's doing a good job. Very good job on your driver you got. 1950 driving road, owned by Heritage. Here's the 2011 4742
Brand new truck. This is what the new ones are going to look like, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, I hope you guys spread that bear so it doesn't bite anybody. Give me some candies. You don't want to be too hungry. Nice truck. Hey, that's a good looking group of guys you got there. One stocks and hay bales and the whole 3 yards. All right. Next one we have coming up is Big John Davis and 52 Minneapolis Mobile. Next one we have is John Otto. And he's driving a 2009 Gator. How's it going, John?
Very good. How are you?
All right. Okay. Here's John Seifert. Driving a 86
Like water? Or World Vision? Thank you. There's a Farmall Lake with a wide front. You don't see too many of those Farmall with a wide front. There we have. That's what it is. And there's Wade. Hey, I like your new hairdo. I think you need a haircut. How's that corn growing down there? All right. Good job. Is that a jail or a program? Is it DJ? Bring up music. Hey, that's all right.
Good job. All right.
Oh, perfect. I like your venue. Hey Harvey, how you doing? You got your road? You got your red top roads for all? Got this in Branson. How you doing, Harv? And this is one here, number 85. 85. Anyway, now we have Jeff Steven with a 69 Ford Mustang. He spent 2.5 years restoring it. Hey, Jeff, it's I drive about an hour and a half ago. Yeah.
Was it a bank?
I know I was going the other way.
Ben, I'm sorry, Ben Williams riding an RC car. There we go. Good job. Good there, Ray. Hey, nice day, Ray. Okay, here's Woodchuck. If you need grease prunes, these are guys to talk to. Woodchuck. You're getting up in the world, aren't you? JP House Construction. How you doing? Does that make you part communist or what?
My go-kart broke down.
Go-kart broke down, huh? Number 59.
Okay, let's watch it. Okay, now do we shift? Okay, here we are back, and now we're going to be talking about roads, and let me give you a little background. Those of you who saw my March show, they changed the road policy 9 or 10 different ways, and they did it in 1 minute and 11 seconds. Brad Reefstock, who's the current engineer, read them so rapidly, it was very hard to understand, and that's why I did a whole show on that. But they made a number of changes. Significant ones is that the city could do blacktop, you know, in a joint organization. They also said they could bundle projects which was not done before. They also said the city council had the final say. It used to be 75% of the people would have to vote for a road project like repavement before it would go forward. Now they swapped it back, and it's a moving target. And if you look carefully, it doesn't matter how much approval. If the mayor and council decide they want to do something, they can do it. The other problem is the current Brad Reefstock, the current engineer. You may or not be aware that engineers get paid as a percentage, 20% of whatever the project is. Well, he always comes in with the top shelf, top end. Example, on 88th and in Jeffrey, there's a little cul-de-sac, and the residents put in for improving it. Now, one of the other things they changed is that the city pays for the feasibility study. There was a feasibility study along 83rd, and only 70% went for it, so they axed it. But anyway, these people said they would go for it, and they had a study that was paid for, and it came out an overlay could be done for $8,000 a person. Well, by the time the engineer got involved, it was jacked up to more than double that, because it wasn't just a patch and overlay, it was a reconstruct, because he wanted to keep the meter running, and that's what this guy does. Another good example of that is McCusick Road. The old engineer, Phil Olson, and I worked together to get an estimate. Now, McCusick Road is the one that goes down off 96 at an angle to Manning. It goes kind of by the Glass House, and it has about 5 inches of asphalt on it, and it's breaking up, and it's bumpy, and I worked with Phil to come up with a project that they would patch all the holes and put a 2-inch overlay, and we could do it for $200,000. And it's about a 2-mile stretch of road, a little better. Not a mill, but just an overlay. Well, Phil Olson left, and Brad Reefstock was the new engineer. He took over, and when he went to explain to the 8 residents that lived on McCusick, oh yeah, it's a total rebuild and this will cost $450,000. He totally ignored the other engineers' research and what we've done and the approach we were taking. And so obviously they said 8 into $450,000, it isn't going to work, you know. So that didn't get done. And that's one of the problems we have in Grant. The current engineer jacks everything up. I talked to one of the contractors, and he worked with Northwestern Asphalt, and they said they can mill an overlay for $50,000 a mile. Reefstock, reportedly, I have this secondhand, so said, there's no way, it's got to be 150. So this guy is going out for the most expensive methods and bids he can find.
And the city council that's currently in place doesn't question any of that.
Questions none of it. Basically, it's on autopilot. When Larry Lanou and I were there, we questioned things, we kept them on their toes. Oh yeah, whatever you say, go ahead and do that. I mean, you know, that's kind of like a Mexican taxi driver on speed with the meter runner.
Well, and you know, when I was watching the film footage that we're going to be showing to our viewers now, there were a couple of other things that I noticed in the way that the meeting progressed, and I'll point those out as we go through that film footage. But they were things that are concerning to me. Certainly, as having been a former mayor, there are things that are concerning to me in the way that the project is presented and the way that residents at many points are talked down to, because I don't believe that that's the way business should be conducted at any city hall, whether or not if it's the city of Grant, the city of Maplewood, or anywhere else.
What's interesting too is through the August meeting, Raj was one of the people that took Larry and my places, missed 4 out of 8 meetings. But they're a bunch of yes men. They whatever the mayor comes up with is what they go with. They question nothing. And well, let's play some clips, and I'll interject my thoughts as we go on the other side.
We're going to jump right into staff agenda items. City Engineer Brad Reesick. Brad, do you want to kind of set up the situation for us a little bit, describe what has taken place to this point, and then I have a couple of comments, and then we'll go ahead and open up our public hearing. So Brad, you're up. Go ahead.
Hey, Mayor, thank you very much. I've got a short PowerPoint presentation that kind of introduces the project here, so it'll take me 5 minutes to go through it real quick.
That first clip, what came to my mind is that the agenda item wasn't introduced. So if you had people at home watching this meeting, they wouldn't even know what was the next agenda item. So as a mayor in the past, it was always appropriate, from my point of view, that the next agenda item, that you would actually be clear as to what that next agenda item is, so that either the people in the audience know what is to be expected to come next, is it the item that they're there for, or that the people who are at home watching the meeting, do they know what is going to be the next topic? And he skipped right over all of that. He just said, okay, we're just going to go right on into this, and okay, gave it to the engineer like there was no introduction. And that, I found that a little bothersome.
Well, they tried, since I was off the council, and even the last few months I was on the council, they would load up the consent agenda, and as you know, there's no discussion on consent agenda unless someone requests it. Well, this is the fight that Larry and I had for years. They changed the rules to say you have to have a motion and a second to discuss things on the consent agenda, then you have to vote by the full council. Well, they had the lead. They had 3 people. Dennis Kopp was there, and he was always a yes man. He never said squat when I was on the council, by the way. That's all he did. And so they basically were trying to ram things through. And what's interesting, since I was off the council since last December was my last meeting, their meetings are maybe a half an hour. An hour if they have a public hearing like this, and I guess a lot of people spoke. I haven't attended meetings. I've taken clips from them, but I haven't attended meetings.
Right, and the issue of the consent agenda, loading up a consent agenda, is a great way to hide the actions of what the council is doing, especially if you have no mechanism by which anybody can pull it an item off to talk about something unless the majority want to talk about it. So you can load up a consent agenda, have all kinds of things voted on without any discussion, without the public even knowing what was on that consent agenda.
There's a lot of residents that aren't happy about this. When I was on the council, I tried to get them to raise taxes at $25 per 100,000. So we could start a road fund and repair the roads that are all going. The roads are very poor. On a 0 to 10, some roads are 3s, 4s, and 5s. There may be one that's 9 that's been just done, just overlaid or something. But the only one I know that is on the south end of Jamica going up the hill. And Shifsky did it. And he did it pretty reasonably, and he added a bunch past his own driveway, so the city didn't pay for it. But he has that company in North St. Paul, and very good company, and they do a lot of bituminous work.
Well, and you mentioned the issue of taxes and having it built into the budget to plan in advance for your road repairs and road reconstruction. Well, as we get moving through our clips, there's one point where Mayor Huber starts doing some calculations as if he is the be-all, know-it-all of how to calculate, how to fund road projects. But we'll get to that.
Oh yeah, it's real interesting because they seal coated the road in front of my house, and after they seal coated, they put oil down on that fine gravel. 2 weeks later, they came back and patched the hole, so our road looks like it has measles. And it's just pathetic. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. But let's go on to the next clip, and we'll see what he has to say.
96th Street North, Justin Trail North, Joliet Avenue North, Jody Avenue North, Jody Avenue Court North, 103rd Street Court North, 103rd Street North, Juneau Avenue North, 101st Street North, Kelman Court North, and Grenlapp Avenue North. So the proposed improvements include full-depth pavement reclamation or milling. The new pavement thickness is between 2.5 to 3 inches thick. And we would take care of some minor drainage issues that are known within the project area. Some of the major design considerations that we looked at during the feasibility stage was the past pavement performance. The existing pavement was anywhere between 1 to 2 inches thick, and it was, the lifespan of that pavement was anywhere between 20 and where we are today at 30 years. So we feel good about the pavement section that we're proposing. Again, the underlying aggregate base thickness and the subgrade condition of the existing streets, I'm assuming, played a large role in the length of the lifetime of those existing streets. And then we looked at the traffic volumes. Joliet Avenue being the street that gets the most traffic, sometimes by 2 to 3 times the other streets that are within the project limits.
This is something that I've also noticed in other cities and other communities where they have their road projects, is that oftentimes they have the main thoroughfares, which of course there's the traffic counts for that says there's a lot of traffic there. Obviously, you need to have a total reconstruction on those roads, because if you want them to last longer, you need to have a better road base. You need to have a deeper road base. That's just the way it works. But then what they do is, in these projects, then they add on other additional side streets that are cul-de-sacs or less used roads, which don't need that same level of road reconstruction to them. It's overkill, because you don't have the count, you don't have the weight going over them, and so you need to adjust for what process you're using on those streets. And yet, even though you adjust the process and the amount of repairs or road reconstruction, do they adjust the assessment amount to be commensurate with the type of construction that's being done on the road in front of your house?
Well, what I had understood, that they were just going to do an overlay in Woodland Acres and Victoria Station. They were going to do a patch and overlay, but they were doing a total reconstruct in Joliet, which would mean they're going to take all the asphalt out, put a new base in it, and that short section of road was going to be about $500,000. Well, there's 8 or 10 people that live on that road, and that would be about 50 grand a person. But what they're going to do then is just do the quick overlay, which can be $50,000 a mile if you get by cheap. Of course, with the reef stock, it ain't going to happen. He'll be 150, because that's just the way he is. He goes for the platinum standard or the gold standard. And what they did, that's why they changed the road policy, so they can bundle this together. So you're getting a $50,000 a mile fix. They're doing a $250,000 a mile fix. They average it out, and everybody pays the same. And it went from a $1.1 million project. Of course, then you have to add 20% for the engineer, because he's overseeing it. Well, now, as I understand it, the project was going to cost about $2 million. Wasn't that what the numbers they came with on that? So all of a sudden, gee whiz, it's now doubled. So we'll watch the rest of the clips, but that is just the game plan. They're playing games. They change the road policy because the mayor and deputy mayor are on that road, and they don't want to pay the freight. Mm-hmm. Simple as that.
And I can tell you that, in past years in Maplewood, they had some road policies and how they did their assessments, but after a couple of lawsuits, they actually revised how they did their assessments. And there's been improvements in that assessment policy as a result of having residents who have assessments challenge them, the municipality, based on what the Constitution of Minnesota and what state statute requires for assessments. And so it'll be interesting as this progresses whether or not, if any of the residents there in the city of Grant who are affected by these assessments, whether or not they will challenge those assessments, and that may be the only way that the road assessment policy can be corrected in the city of Grant. But let's continue with our film footage.
The anticipated cost and funding of the project, the feasibility report showed an estimated project cost of $1,963,373, or $373, excuse me. The funding for this roadway project will partly from city roadway funds of $119,778, and the special assessments for this project are $1,843,595. So the estimated special assessments are governed by the City of Grant's assessment policy. Just to go through that real briefly here, the assessment shall be allocated on a per project basis. Each buildable lot is assessed as one unit. Each buildable lot with a road frontage but with an address on a different street shall be assessed 1/4 unit. Each buildable lot with no frontage but address on the road to be improved shall be assessed as 1/4 unit, and the project is approximately 150 buildable units.
Now, with the Minnesota statute governing special assessments, the assessment that is charged to the resident has to be equal to or less than the increase in value to the property as a result of the road reconstruction project. So I think there's a good argument, Mr. Cedarstrom, that if there's somebody who is having simply a mill and overlay going on in front of their house, but they're being charged an assessment that is for a total reconstruction, that they could argue that that assessment is an overassessment. And in one of our previous programs, we called what your engineer is proposing for the assessment program, that it's really governed by the squeal factor. How much can you raise the special assessment until somebody squeals? And that's really the method I think that they're using, rather than using the state statute and the Minnesota Constitution as their guide in setting special assessments.
Well, what wasn't clear with this is I did the math, it's $1.9 million plus. Now, is the engineer's fees in there? That's another thing that wasn't made clear. If he gets his 20% on top of that, that's going to be $2,200,000 at least. So, and again, the other thing I want to say is, you was talking to mill and overlay. When you only have 1 inch to 2 inches of asphalt, there's nothing to mill. The only thing, you either take it all up or you do an overlay. There's no way to mill 1 inch of asphalt. It isn't going to happen.
Right. Well, let's continue.
Parcels that are affected by the assessments, and this was actually mailed out to the residents with the map and the public notice hearing to each parcel. Again, the assessment or the public notice was advertised twice in the newspaper per Minnesota state statute. So the estimated special assessments, again, like I said, the estimated assessment for this project is $1,843,595. The project is approximately 150 buildable units. The assessments are typically amortized over a 10-year period at a rate set by council. Again, even the period is set by the council, so in past projects we've used 10 years, but you can certainly go to a longer period, a shorter period, or whatever the council decides to do. And the assessment per buildable unit for this project is estimated at $12,817 plus interest if the amount is not paid in full. So the assessment, again, is estimated at $136 a month using the $12,817 plus a 4.5% interest is what we typically use in past projects. So just to give folks an idea what it would cost on a monthly basis.
Well, what's interesting about that is the 4.5% interest. You have money in the bank and you're getting 0.5%. They're making money all over. They're making more money on the residents on the assessment than they have for the reserves. So, and they don't even get a kiss with that.
Well, let's continue.
Right. Yeah, we had individual residents come forward and say it was time to get this done. Our roads are almost never initiated, just to make that point a little bit clearer, never initiated by the council. This council does not say we're going to do a road and then send out a notice that you're getting a bill. That's not how it works in this city. It is always initiated from the residents, and the residents come forward with those petitions and learn how to do it and get these jobs rolling, and then we determine whether or not it makes a good value for the city and the citizens and the people that have championed it to go ahead and order these or not. And that's why we're all here tonight, to figure out whether or not it's going to be a good value for your folks or not, and whether or not we should move forward. So,
Well, that's a big lie to begin with, because Joliet has been on the special road project list for the last 3 years. The council has put it there. They initiated. So once again, Mayor Huber is lying.
And
'Cause-
he's trying to push this onto the residents so that they will fight amongst themselves, between the people who want it and the people who don't. So he's pushing it back onto them so they can fight amongst themselves, and then that way he is separate and removed from all that. And we'll see something that'll look like that, which demonstrates that. Let's take a look.
any of you that know me know that I kind of got a thing for math. I like math. And some people want to know why the city has a road policy like this. Why do we assess 100%? What kind of craziness is this? Why do we do this like this? Doesn't seem to make sense. Well, first of all, let's identify who the city is. If you look to your right and your left, that's the city, the residents of the city. We get no gas tax money. Every time you fill up your gas tank, we get zero. Other cities get that. Montemita gets about $250,000 a year because they're over 5,000 population. We get nothing from the state, from the federal government, nothing, okay? So everything that we do on your roads, the plowing, the police officer that's here with us tonight, the fire department, everything that we do comes out of your property taxes, every last thing. So we are a little short. Our levy, the amount of taxes that we're taking from 1,374 households and our just over 4,000 residents this year, is $1,283,167. That's what we are taking in taxes as a city to fund everything that I have just talked about. $1,283,167. As Brad let us know, the project is coming in at $1,963,373 for 5.1 miles. Little shortfall there. Okay, we got a little bit of money that we couldn't do, even if we took our entire budget, had no police, no fire, no plowing, no gravel, no nothing, we'd still be about $700,000 short.
The interesting thing is, the roads, the grading is all paid for. So if you live on a gravel road, you get lifts, you get grading. The problem with Grant is 50% of the homes are on state or county roads, and they're free, okay? They go, and we have
And
such...
so, in other words, the city of Grant isn't responsible for 50% of the roads that are in the community.
That's right.
And so his argument is somewhat misleading in that respect.
Oh, he lies all
And
over
you
the place.
see, he uses these sales techniques to try and persuade people to the point of view he wants them to come up to. So he's going to continue with his math. So let's take a look.
Look at how Grant is set up in terms of the frontages that we have. I own property in other places, and the frontages are 50, 60, 70 feet in a city, right? So every 50, 60, 70 feet, you have a household, and that household pays property taxes. And that's normally enough to take care of that 50, 60, 70 feet in front of that house, whatever it may be. In Grant, we have a minimum 300 foot of frontage. That's your minimum. You can't even build a house unless you have 300 foot of frontage, okay? So if we just do a little bit of math here, we have 69.8 miles of roads. That's the total amount of roads in Grant, just about 70. So if you do that, you do that times 5,280, which is a mile. Bear with me here for a second. 5,280, which is a mile, and then you multiply that by 2 because you have two sides of the frontage, okay? You come up with 737,088 lineal feet. Okay, so that's what needs to be taken in the city of Grant from your property taxes. But let's go a little bit further and divide that by the number of households called out in our last census, which is 1,374 households. So we have 1,374 households. We have 737,088 lineal feet to take care of. Well, let's do a little division. That comes up to 536.45 lineal feet per household. Not 300, 536. Next time you drive by that pretty cornfield or that lake or something else, well, that all needs to be paved, it all needs to have police protection, it all needs to be potholed, it all needs to be taken care of. And that's 536 feet. So that's what the tax liability, if we're just to do some simple division, is in each household, okay? Now, if we were to use our entire budget, the $1,283,000, or our levy, the $1,283,167, and divide it by that 738, that gives us $1.74. That's our entire levy, everything we take from you in taxes, every last dime. That's nothing for police, anybody else. That's $1.74 per year for each lineal foot of road. It's hard to maintain a city with 70 miles of roads for $1.74 for each lineal foot of road if I took every bit of taxes from you and just applied it to the roads.
Wow, I am so convinced. I am so convinced. Where can I send my check?
Yeah,
Now,
well-
here's the question, Mr. Cedarstrom. 70 miles of roadway. Is that the accurate number, or is the accurate number of roadway that Grant is responsible for a different number?
Well, that's pretty close. That's what we have. But 35 miles are asphalt and 35 miles are gravel. So you're looking at, they have to grade it on a regular basis. They put calcium chloride on it. They do all these things. So the people that live in gravel roads get their roads taken care of, and the people that are on asphalt don't. The other thing is, the people that live on county and state roads, do they drive on local roads? Yes. The other thing they're trying to do, they're trying to keep it, what is it, 8 cents or 9 cents out of every dollar goes to the city of Grant. 54% goes to Montemita High School if you're in that section of town. What they should be doing, and it's what I proposed, $25 per 100,000 of value of your house. It will go into a road fund. Everybody'd be paying $100 a year, and the roads would be all maintained. But again, this guy's blowing smoke. He wants to be cheap. He's Neanderthal. And they don't want to come into the 20th century, say nothing about the 21st with their road policy.
Well, we have one last clip to look at.
Feel free, everyone has a calculator out there. All the figures I just pulled are right from the city website. You can take a look at it. So, that is why our road policy over the years has been written the way it's been written. Because there was never enough ability or enough households to pull enough taxes to do these things without this assessment policy. I can't figure out any other way to do it. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. I don't have gas tax money, I don't have federal money, I don't have state money, county gives us nothing, so that's what we deal with. So it's that home in the country thing where people go, well, I want to live in a home in the country, but I want a really nice road too.
Well, there you go. Just
You could-
more of the same, blaming it on the other guy, blaming it on past administrations, blaming it on the failure to figure out what to do in the future and figure out the trends. And we've come to the end of our program, Mr. Cedarstrom. I want to thank you for inviting me on your program. And viewers, tune in again next week. We'll have more news.
All right.
Bye-bye.